Everybody stop where you're at. Have a seat.
This video was intended to inform and educate the public.
Welcome back to another episode of the Junkyard News. And in today's video news story, we are going to be talking briefly about a deaf man who is facing aggravated assault charges against a Phoenix police officer after authorities alleged that he bit one of them during a self-defense struggle in which officers had punched and tased him, when it turns out the accusations against him weren't even true to begin with. Let's get into it. Now, officers Benjamin Harris and Kyle Sue were called to a Circle K to remove a man who employees said refused to leave the store. Now, the officers spoke to this man outside, and he pointed to a man across the street, alleging that that man had assaulted him. And the cops asked the suspect, "Are you alleging that guy across the street assaulted you and you want him to go to jail?" And the suspect confirmed, yes. And both officers decided to leave the suspect where he was, still on the store's property. When they were there to get him off the property, drove across the street to approach 34-year-old Tyron. It turns out it was a lie. It was a distraction technique to get the officers away from the original suspect call. I ain't gonna leave if I don't want to. Go deal with that guy, that stranger that I had no interaction with whatsoever. But I'm gonna tell you that he assaulted me just so you leave me alone and go bug him. Just some innocent guy walking down the street. And it turns out that Tyron is deaf with cerebral palsy. So once these officers decide to leave the actual suspect and go over and try to stop and talk to Tyron, one of the officers drives up to Tyron, who can be seen walking across the dollar store parking lot. And as the officer drives up to him, he says, "Hey buddy, stop where you're at." But remember, Tyron's deaf. And when he doesn't immediately stop, the officer takes that as a sign as, "Oh boy, we gonna have us some fun." Because the officer then pulls up next to him and in less than a second jumps out of his car, reaches out while saying at the same time, "Have a seat," and the force begins. Now, what would you think if you're deaf and you have a disability and you're just walking, minding your own business, in a corner of your eye you see some guy jump out of a car and just start attacking you? It's fight or flight at that moment in time. And yes, a physical altercation does ensue. But remember, Tyron doesn't know what's going on. Tyron never hurt an officer. He's deaf. The cop could have just got out of his car, walked up to him, and put his hands up and says, "Hey, buddy, stop. Let him know. Hey, I want to have some type of conversation with you." But no, he jumps out and goes on the attack. Now, when the police ended up investigating the original assault complaint, they found out that it was baseless. It never happened. But because of this interaction that Tyron had with these officers and the injuries the officers ended up with, he is now being charged with assaulting a police officer. And he did show up in court, where a judge looked at the evidence to see if there was enough evidence to proceed with a prosecution against this deaf man. The judge could have stopped this whole thing right there. Could have looked at the evidence and say, okay, somebody lied and said this guy did something. The guy's deaf. He never heard the cop. And the cop just jumped out and started attacking this guy who has no idea what's going on, can't hear a thing, has cerebral palsy. Okay, I can understand this guy was possibly just acting in self-defense. Didn't know what was going on. This is all on the cops. The cops did this and said, "You know what? I'm going to dismiss this charge. It's a travesty of justice to go forward." Do you think that's what the judge did? Well, here's the news clips about the incident. You be careful, people. I'm telling you, you do never know when something like this can happen to you. And if you're not careful, we could be highlighting a video and a news story about you in the future.
Months after that recent Department of Justice report against the Phoenix Police Department, which found that they used excessive force and discriminated against Black, Hispanic, and Native American people. In this body cam video, you can see an officer immediately go after McAlpin, and a security camera shows the officer drive in front of him while he's walking before the officer engages him. According to the police report, that's when McAlpin fought back against the officers. Another officer arrives on scene, however, his body camera somehow flies off during the incident. The police report states that on August 19th, they were investigating an assault at a nearby Circle K and reported that McAlpin fit the description of the suspect from the victim. In the video, you don't really hear McAlpin talk, just sort of yell. He's seen being hit multiple times by the officers and even tased while on the ground. And after McAlpin is in handcuffs, a woman at the scene can be heard pleading to the officers that he has various disabilities.
He's got a disability.
What kind of disabilities do you have?
He's deaf and he's got cerebral palsy.
Okay.
And I've been on the phone with him since Circle K.
How is he deaf if you've been on the phone?
Because I spoke sign language, that's why. I signed to him. That's why. You guys are messing with him for no reason.
Phoenix police giving us this statement in response to the arrest. The incident is the subject of an ongoing investigation and is assigned to the Professional Standards Bureau, common for all use of force incident reviews on August 30th of 2024. In the report, it also says McAlpin bit one of the officers, and in the video you can see an officer pointing to his bloody hand. Now, we do know that McAlpin was arrested for aggravated assault, assault against a peace officer, and resisting arrest.
Everybody stop where you're at. Have a seat. Tase him, tase him, tase him. Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back. Hold them. Move.
We were in court for what's called a preliminary hearing. Basically, that's a hearing to decide if there's enough evidence for charges to go forward. And that means the two main officers had to take the stand under oath.
Since that day,
This is Officer Benjamin Harris, and this is Officer Kyle Sue. They're in court to testify against Tyron McAlpin. He's deaf. He has cerebral palsy, and he's here for a judge to decide if there's probable cause for his arrest on August 19th, 2024. Why did officers go after Tyron? It's because a Circle K called about this guy. His name is Derek, and while Derek was being removed, he pointed at Tyron walking across the street and claimed Tyron had assaulted him.
And you didn't confirm Derek's story with any of the witnesses inside?
No. Why didn't you wait here for him?
Derek's story would end up being false, but in that moment, the officers decided to take Derek's word at face value, leave him, and go after Tyron.
We already established that when you pulled into the parking lot and yelled at Tyron, he didn't respond to you, correct?
Correct.
Did you check to see if he had headphones in?
I didn't notice.
Okay. Did you check to see if there was a reason why he couldn't hear you?
No.
Did you try to wave him down?
No.
During your initial interaction with Tyron, you wrote that Tyron raised his hands. Can you describe what that looked like?
Yeah, he raised them in a manner that appeared to me he was going to use them to punch me.
So he raised his hands like this?
No.
Can you demonstrate again, please?
Yeah, he raised them in a manner that appeared to be ready to strike me. So what that communicated to me is I was about to get assaulted, not that someone was giving up.
Now, is it possible that Tyron raised his hand to protect himself from your punches?
That's not what his body language communicated to me.
I'm asking you if it's possible. Are you saying it's not possible? Okay.
I don't know if it's possible. So just underneath my ring finger at that.
If you've noticed the cast on Officer Harris's hand, it's because he broke his finger arresting Tyron. And at the end of his testimony, the prosecutor asked Officer Harris how all of this could have been avoided.
the defendant had just put his hands down or said, I can't hear, or I need to write, or something like that. What would you have done?
I would have had him sit down, made motions with my hands to have him sit down, and then I would have gotten a pen,
You wouldn't have
paper and pen out for him.
You wouldn't have punched him in the head and knocked him to the ground and tasered him?
No.
Now, let's get to the testimony from Officer Sue.
As I was going to pull in the park, I looked over and observed the defendant actively swing at Officer Harris, and then as I was putting my car in the park, I jumped out and ran over there.
Sue's body camera fell off, but during the arrest, he testified that Tyron bit his hand.
Can you hold up your hand high so we can see, show the judge exactly, point where it was that he bit you?
Right there.
Okay.
There's no body camera footage that shows the bite.
Hands behind your back!
And here's what happened when Tyrone's attorneys asked the officer to go through the video.
Anywhere in there?
Nope.
And stop at the moment when he says Tyrone bit him.
Right there.
The moment Officer Sue pinpointed is when the other officer's camera pans up and you can't see Tyrone. The defense asked Sue if it was possible that he cut or scraped his hand on Tyrone's mouth or the ground while choking him. But Officer Sue said no and denied using a chokehold.
Is that your arm there, directly around his throat?
The one on the bottom?
Yes.
That's my arm.
Okay. And that is around Tyrone's throat, correct?
Looks too hard to tell.
So how is this not a chokehold?
When I think of a chokehold, I think of two arms from the same person.
In a bizarre moment, the prosecution then got back up to prove Tyrone bit the officer, first showing pictures, then asking for a demonstration.
Would you open up your mouth and stick your wrist in your mouth?
Say again?
Could you open your mouth and stick your wrist in your mouth? And then pull it out to the side? Did you just cut your arm?
Objection, Your Honor. This is extremely speculative and really doesn't.
Overruled. I just watched him do it. That's not speculation. He's demonstrating.
Officer, did you just cut your arm when you did that?
I did not.
At this time, I do believe the state has presented sufficient evidence to establish.
In the end, the judge found there was probable cause for the criminal case to move forward against Tyrone. The judge didn't give an explanation, but the ruling means Tyrone still faces felony charges of aggravated assault and resisting arrest.
Mr. McAlpin, this will conclude today's hearing. I'll have you stepped over to my bailiff just to sign for those release conditions, but good luck to you moving forward in your case.
Again, Phoenix is not commenting on the arrest because they say it's under investigation. But this case is a sensitive one. We've learned the DOJ is now aware of the case. And it's important to remember that the arrest happened after the DOJ released its historic investigation into Phoenix PD. And the feds say they want to put the department under federal oversight.